Our first conversation right now is about what you have just seen, and recently you also learned that a group known as Concerned Alumni of Nigerian Universities are trying to wade in on this conversation to ensure that ASUU returns to school, the federal government does the needful, whichever way this works for all parties concerned. And of course, you also know that some state governors are also saying, hey, we do what we're supposed to do. Why then are you, on strike when we're not owing you? Well, that and a number of other things you may find in this conversation happening with Malkwe in Abuja.
Thank you, Ayo. Well, on the 14th of this month, that's 14th of September, it will be exactly 7 months since ASUU embarked on this strike. And I don't think that when it started on the 14th of February, a lot of people saw that it was going to be extending till this time, but this is now what we currently have. There have been negotiations back and forth. In some instances, it would seem that progress was being made and light was appearing almost at the end of the tunnel, but so far so good. Students are still at home. As a matter of fact, last week, ASUU declared an indefinite strike action when it wasn't getting making the headway that it had hoped that it was going to make in the negotiations. However, a lot of Nigerians are concerned about children still staying at home. Well, they're not exactly babies, but these are people that parents are still responsible for and have to look after, and how this has a general effect on the society at large, people who are not gainfully employed, like the young people whom we've seen in that report, could be up to no good if care is not taken. So we have this morning Dr. Cletus Acquire, who is a former Commissioner for Information, Benue State, and also publisher and editor-in-chief, Daily Asset newspaper. Wading in this morning, I think he also represents a group Concerned Alumni of Nigerian Universities. What exactly is the concern of this particular alumni? And is this just a recent organization? Just curious.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in the ongoing conversation about the prolonged strike by the Academic Staff Union of Universities. All of us have been to Nigerian universities or some foreign universities. We belong to one alumni association or the other. I belong to quite a few, having attended my university in Nigeria for the first degree and the higher degrees. So what is happening is of concern to a wide variety of Nigerians across the board. So those of us that attended Nigerian universities are concerned. And so we have come together to raise concern or to join our voices with all the stakeholders to try to ensure that this issue of the prolonged strike by ASUU is resolved. So that is our concern. There must be a time for every course of action. The time that we're in, that the crisis we're facing in the tertiary institutions, particularly in the universities, has called for concerted efforts. And that's why those of us who feel concerned can no longer sit on the fence. We have to participate in the ongoing conversation, make our own contributions to ensure that sanity is restored on the campuses.
Well, for a number of people, I do not know if you have been able to take a look at what ASUU is asking for. I mean, they're not just a frivolous group of people. They won't have just gone on strike just for the heck of it. They've been making some requests or some demands of the federal government before now. It has not been acceded to, and that's the reason why they have embarked on this particular strike. How would you rate the federal government's response to ASUU?
Well, let me make this clarification. I do not think that anybody is taking ASUU for granted in this country. Nobody believes that ASUU's demands, whatever they are frivolous. A lot of us welcome the concern of ASUU for improvement of education in the country, especially university education. Nobody can fault the need to have quality education delivered to our children. Nobody can afford that. And everybody's on the same page with ASUU on the need to improve the delivery of education to our students. However, the methodology adopted to bring these changes to be is what some of us have concern with. You recall that in your opening remarks, you say this strike will hit 7 months in a few days. Yes, today is about 204 days since the strike started. ASUU had laid before the federal government a charter of demands, as I would say. These demands are not exactly new. They are a carryover from the 2009 negotiated agreement with the federal government. You may also recall that in the last 30 years, ASUU has gone on strike in each and every administration that governed this country. And these demands have really not changed. A few have been met, a few not met, but all border on the germane issue of delivery of quality education to our students and welfare of the academic staff. Now, having gone through this route for nearly 30 years, ASUU doesn't appear to be getting to its desired destination. And that is why the strike is continuing now, even indefinitely. So the question is, if we have tried one approach to resolving a problem for nearly 30 years, is it not high time we had a rethink to look at other strategies as well? Because we've used the language of strike all along, and it appears that it's not just the Buhari administration. And let it be clear, I don't work for the government. I'm just a concerned Nigerian about this issue. The ASUU strikes were on in the Jonathan administration. President Obasanjo had his own share of the strikes, and even the previous military administrations had their own share of this. So, should we continue along this line? Now, in the report before this, you showed some young students. They were lucky to be taken to some vocations or some engagements that probably will be able to give them some income. But there are many other youths out there, some students that are staying at home, that have taken to crime. I have an incident in my state where recently some students, some university students who ought to be on campus were involved in the case of kidnapping. And the law in the state requires that any property that has been used for kidnapped victims should be brought down. And the house belonged to a retired jurist who is even late. And the state government ordered the demolition of that house simply because the students had used that structure to keep their victims and demand for ransom. And we can count so many of these instances where students who ought to be on campuses have taken to crime. Now, we need to strike a balance. Yes, ASUU wants to improve the quality of learning and the welfare of their members. Nobody is faulting this. Now, the very students they want to protect, the better society they want to build in terms of delivery of quality education is being turned upside down. These same students that we want to mold to better citizens are now taken to crime. So the question is, should we continue on this route? I'm not holding brief for the government, as I said. The government may have met some of the demands of ASUU. You will see that when this strike started, it's not only ASUU that were on strike. You had the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, they were on strike. The Association of Academic University Academicians, they were on strike. And other industrial unions that
I think about 3 of them were on strike.
These unions have called off their strike, and they also gave the federal government 2 months within which to ensure that the issues in contention were being implemented. So they have called off their strike and are waiting 2 months to see that the federal government began the implementation of this. I think with ASUU, one of the most contentious issues now is the issue of whether or not the federal government should pay the arrears of salaries for the time of the strike. I believe this is one of the contentious issues. The other issues would be evidence that the funds are being released to the universities for payment of some of the charges that have been negotiated. I think that the ASUU negotiation with the federal government, they may not have achieved 100%. But I'm sure that a lot of grounds have been covered. And in a negotiation, when you have reached a certain level where you think that you have gained some, you adjust your position so that at least you consolidate on what you have, and then as it is said in the labor movement, the struggle continues. Our take is that the struggle to build a good society, a better society, even the ideal society, if we would like, is not a job that can be done in one day. It's a continuum. It's a continuous process. It cannot be decreed.
Yes.
It evolves.
What I'm curious about is why the appeal of concerned Nigerians is to ASUU. Because ASUU will also argue that they have their children. A lot of the lecturers have their children in these universities where they themselves lecture. That they have not gone on strike for their own benefit. They've gone on strike for the future of Nigeria. Shouldn't we, as as a people, be piling pressure on the federal government to see how it can quickly accede to the demand of ASUU? Why do we think ASUU should be the body that we appeal to?
No, nobody is sparing the federal government in this conversation. We are all concerned, and we are appealing to all parties in the dispute to close their ranks. But there's more on the side of ASUU, because ASUU are the people that are on strike. Okay, the federal government is not on strike. The appeal is going to the federal government to also come in to do what they're supposed to do. But a greater appeal is going to ASUU in the sense that, in this case, they appear to be holding the yam and the knife, as Africans would say, because as long as they're on strike, the university will remain closed. So this is why the appeal appears to be going more to ASUU. It doesn't mean that the federal government is not being also pressurized upon. There have been a lot of calls on the federal government to attend to the demands of ASUU. But the point we are trying to make here is that, can all of these demands be met in a go? I don't think so. A lot could be done, but to say that the problems of Nigerian universities can be addressed in a go or with one strike is not possible. We're talking about funding, adequate funding of the universities. Now, the reality is very clear to us, and it's very clear to even members of ASUU. When in the 70s and the 80s, you know the statistics, we had an annual intake of less than 100,000 students. Now we have more than 1 million students every year. And you discover that 2022, 2021, and 2020, from all the university tertiary matriculation examination conducted by JAMB, over 1 million students participated in these examinations. And that goes to say that over 1 million candidates are awaiting admission. In the last 3 years, most of the universities have not conducted fresh admissions. So we're not even talking about just the students that are already on campus. We're even talking about students that are waiting to even enter into the system. For 3 years, they're at home. So you can imagine the pain of parents, you can imagine the frustration of these young people, whom we are also fighting to better their future. So these are the issues. Now, when we talk about adequate funding, can we really fund the universities the way that the positions have been laid on the table? It could be done, but can it be done in one day? I don't think so. And this is why we're saying, let us have a way that the universities reopen, while the discussion to implement some of these things that have been agreed continues. It's not as if the federal government, I think the federal government has yielded some grounds. On the areas that have yielded ground, let there be implementation. And then ASUU also reopens the universities, and then let the dialogue continue. Because we are not operating in isolation. We are operating among the Community of Nations. In other climes, how do we handle dispute between academic staff and students? Most of our colleagues here have gone to foreign universities. Even in African countries, is strike the only language to negotiate? Is strike the only language to get the government to deliver on certain policies? I don't think so. As academics, we should be more ingenious. We should come up with even better strategies and even more modalities. And if we blame the present administration that it is not doing enough, what happened in the Jonathan administration? What happened in the Buhari administration? The Obasanjo administration? What happened in all the previous administrations that these strikes have continued? So the point here is that the strikes, as useful as they are as a tool for negotiation in an event of labor dispute, they are not proven to be giving us the kind of result that we desire. So I think that we should look forward to combining other strategies. How about the future of the universities that is not only hinged on government funding? Can't we look at other models of funding the universities? How about private sector participation in various levels? People have talked about, as a matter of fact, some universities have started involving the private sector in provision of hostels, for instance. Are there no other ways that we can involve the private sector to fund? Should university education be completely free? These are the questions. And even those who went to university in the 70s and the 80s, when tuitions were free, somebody was paying for this. I believe the federal government and the state governments were delivering subsidies to universities for tuition, and the Federal Scholarship Board and the Student Loans Board. Some of these things were in effect. So somebody was paying for this. So university education cannot be completely 100% provided by any government anywhere in the world. The parents must participate, the student must participate, other stakeholders, the private sector, foundations, non-governmental organizations. Most of the universities in advanced countries are they're not even owned by the government. Some of the famous universities are owned by charities and foundations. And so to say that the federal government must fund 100% everything.
Is that what ASUU is saying? We can always confirm from them, but I don't know that that's what ASUU is saying.
Let me make this clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, the Charter of Demands that ASUU has brought forward, why has it been impossible for the federal government to implement this? You cite corruption, you cite inefficiency of government, you cite leakages in revenue, you cite a lack of attention to education, maybe low budgetary provisions, you talk of. All these have been there. Why has it been so? It's a process. We cannot get this thing to be done in one day. And education, we are all involved. It should be given priority. Nobody's faulting ASUU on this. We are just saying that, now, do we stand in one place and insist that until all these things are done, progress cannot be made? If all other sectors were to shut down until all these things were done, will any sector be up and going? So this is why we're calling for a rethink. We're calling for a reconsideration on the part of all stakeholders, not just ASUU, but every stakeholder. And when we say stakeholder, it's not only the government and ASUU that are involved. There are many others, the students, the parents, the non-governmental organizations, and every other person is involved.
Okay, let me flip this conversation to Lagos now.
Well,
Lady and gentlemen.
Thank you, Markwe. Dr. Kwaya, perhaps there is a need for us to even understand what the issues are here, really. When we say funding education, maybe there is a need to really decrypt what we're talking about here. Just yesterday, we had a guest in our studio here who was saying, look, he has a doctorate degree, such as your distinguished self, and he said he regretted having it. He said it on live TV because as far as he is concerned, it didn't look like it has amounted to anything, and he was also talking in the same fray about this ASUU strike and the rest of it. So one is wondering, perhaps there is a need for people to understand exactly what we are talking about when we are talking about funding education, especially tertiary education, for which, case ASUU is fighting. Many lecturers can hardly be able to meet their own needs, personal needs. School infrastructure is decrepit. And there are many who have also looked at the curriculum of the schools and they're wondering exactly how does this take us to the next decade from here. You have been in government and you understand perhaps some of the issues that we're talking about when we're talking about funding education. Maybe there is a need for people to understand, exactly what we are talking about here. This particular conversation that ASUU is on has been on since 2009. And as you rightly said, we have had many strikes way before the Obasanjo government, since way back into the 80s. So maybe there is a need for us to understand what is at risk, what is jeopardized every time we do not allow education to be funded the way it is supposed to be funded, historically and futuristically.
Well, first of all, I have no regret over my own doctorate degree. I earned it at the University of Lagos, and unlike the other person who came on the program to regret, I have no regrets. I'm appreciative of the university system in Nigeria where I got all my degrees. Now, back to the issue that you're talking about, comprehensive funding or decade funding. As you have rightly pointed out, this matter has been on for over 3 decades or more. The quest for ASUU to get the government to fund the universities, and the problem has persisted. What this tells us, what this talks to us is that the problems cannot be solved in a day. The problem, if it has taken over 3 decades, it shows that it is a part of the Nigerian system. Now, you see, our universities, the media, the health sector, and all the other sectors that we have are a reflection of the entire Nigerian society. There's no one sector that is likely to grow faster. Even our security, we blame our security operatives for the insecurity in the country and all of these things, but we cannot go faster than the Nigerian society itself. The Nigerian society is a developing society, it's evolving. There's no sector in this country that you can say is working ideally or is even delivering maximally the way Nigerians would expect. But it's work in progress. That's the point we're making. So education, you have mentioned deteriorating facilities, absence of infrastructure, and so on and so forth. You are saying just what is there. But then the question is, do we remain in one place? Can't we begin to take steps going forward, begin to make progress, so that at the end we address these issues, we itemize them, we prioritize them, and we address them? But when we just put everything in the basket and insist that unless this is done, we'll not do this, we'll not do this, I think that is where some of us concerned Nigerians are having problems. We respect members of ASUU.
The issue here,
we have been part of the
just 1 second, if you can hear me.
We're not against that.
Just 1 second, Dr. Akwaya. As you have said, this issue has been on for decades, and ASUU has been on and off of strike for decades, and now you're saying ASUU should shift ground. That's fine, that's understandable in the interest of national development. Just a second. The question then is, why has it taken governments, successive administration? Government is one, government is a continuum. Why has it taken government, in your opinion, you have been in government, successive administrations, the challenge, why has it taken them so long to be able to look at the importance of education and give it the priority it deserves in the interest of Nigeria's posterity?
Yes, it has taken the government. We can say government has not done what it should do as far as the education sector is concerned. Can we also talk to other sectors? The story is the same. In the health sector, are we not talking about health tourism in this country, people going out to get health services? You can also talk about insecurity. Are we not getting our ammunition and everything from abroad? And every other sector you go to. So the issue is that we need to realize that the problems bedeviling Nigeria, the problem impeding Nigeria's progress and development, are not limited to the education sector alone. Education sector is suffering the same way other the health.
But for now, Dr. Akwaya, we are talking about education.
So the point
just a second, sir. We are talking at this point. At this point, we are talking about education. So yes. So let's just try to focus squarely on that for a bit.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm back to education.
Yes.
We are saying what? Yeah. The point I'm making is that if the language of strike has gone on for over 3 decades, and the government cannot listen, and the government does not listen to do what the ASUU is demanding for, the question is, do we continue to travel on this road? We have applied one solution to a problem for over 3 decades, and it doesn't seem to be working. Can't we try something else? Can't we try other models to bring about the changes that we need or we desire? That's the question.
Well, it's an endless question. Concerned. Yes,
it's not about.
Yes, it's an endless question that we for which reason you are here. Actually, there are one or two other things. Just a second. One or two other things that we can take you on.
I don't work in the government, so but I am not a government official. I don't know why it will be. It has taken this, but the point I know as a Nigerian that is concerned, that is conscious.
We'll come back to some of these other issues, Dr. Akwaya. Just a second. We understand all the issues that you've talked about. You've said that this hasn't been resolved down through the ages, and you are proposing other models. What these other models are, you share with us when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
We had a meeting with government was in June, or May or June. when the chief of staff, the government director, met in a tripartite plus, what they refer to as a tripartite plus meeting, I think early June, we had that meeting, and we agreed that within 6 weeks we reconvene, and the committee will set up in place, will come back and report to us, and we'll take a final decision. But since now, that committee in attendance was the chief of staff, secretary to the federal government, the Sultan of Sokoto, Nairek, the president of Khan, and all the unions. And we met and raised the issues. And they gave the Nimi Breeze Committee time, 2 weeks or so to finish the negotiation, gave UTAS, what do you call it, Anida, 3 weeks to finish testing. And we thought that within the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks, this issue they will return back. The chief of staff will reconvene that meeting. Then the strike will call off.
But has that not been overtaken by the Minister of Education taking over negotiations now?
Will you compare a minister, if you look at a committee headed by chief of staff and minister, which one is higher?
Have you met the minister since?
We have not. We have not had any official meeting with him. Nothing. All we had are just unofficial meeting. That is it. Private meeting. That's not official meeting. We have not had any. As a union, we are open to invitation to anybody. We are willing. This issue can be resolved in 1 day. If the government side insists here, I'm not just looking for a way either to punish the union or blackmail, as Minister of Education said, that we want to use this, what we are doing to ASUU, to teach the labor a lesson. You can imagine that. Your university are short. You are negotiating with the union, and you say, I want to use this particular thing to teach the union a lesson. You can imagine that. So a minister is going to say, students, go and sue your lecturer because government delayed the process. You see, those are the things you should not hear in a sane system.
Thanks for staying with us. Dr. Kwaya, you said that we should attempt to adopt some other models different from the one that we have adopted over the years. Well, I'm wondering what those models are. We have private universities, and there are situations where even the current system that we have, one of the functions that lecturers are supposed to be performing is that of researching. I'm not sure how much they're able to do that in the current space, in the current scheme of things. So in terms of what else they can do, what other model we can adopt for funding tertiary institutions in Nigeria, what's your suggestion?
There are quite a number of models, and I spoke about some of them earlier in this conversation. Over time, ASUU was able to get the federal government bring about independence of the universities. Independence in terms of the universities deciding how they elect their leaders, their vice chancellors, elect their deans and heads of department, and so on and so forth. One way to go is to get to deepen the independence of the university, the federal government on the universities. Government begins to make a gradual withdrawal and allow the universities to take charge of their own activities. By doing so, the university will develop, we gain independence to control their finances and be able to charge relevant fees applicable to their own circumstances so that all stakeholders make contributions. It's not just everything comes from the budget. The students make a contribution, the parents make a contribution, and other stakeholders make a contribution. That is one way to go.
Just 1 second, if you can hear me.
Is to look at...
Just 1 second. Do the laws... My apologies for butting in. Do the laws that set up the universities permit them to go the route that you're talking about?
For most of the reforms that were carried out, it required amendment of the laws. There's nothing that can be done as long as that becomes the government policy and this has been agreed upon by the parties involved. Legislations can be reworked to accommodate the new direction that the country would like to go in attending to this problem. Because as we rightly pointed out, these problems have lingered for long. And I believe that the legislature will be willing and should be willing to participate in this in terms of working out the appropriate legislation that will bring about the changes that we're talking about. We are all concerned about this because we live in this country and all of us agree that education is a bedrock. It requires all hands to be on deck. So my take is that it's not a question of shift or apportioning blames. As you are pointing the accusing finger to one quarter, some other fingers may be pointing to you. So it requires all stakeholders to be on board. It's not a matter of we versus them. I think this is what has complicated the issues towards finding more enduring solutions to the challenges that we face on the campus.
And that's where I'd like to come in, Dr. Akwanga.
And the new approaches, and we're not lacking new approaches. I believe it is the willpower to implement from all parties. It's not just the government. All parties must agree that the language of strike and continuous strike has not gotten government to do the needful. What else should we do?
You talked about apportioning blames, and that's where I'd like to come in, Dr. Akwaya, particularly to refer to, some of your submissions on the ASUU strike. I recall earlier that you said that no one is taking ASUU for granted, really. And I'd like to, and you also talked about how our government has shifted grounds, has met some of ASUU's demands, but that would not be capturing what is happening accurately, because ASUU is saying that all contentious issues between government and ASUU is not true that they have been settled. For instance, ASUU says none of the issues that forced our union to resume the suspended strike as listed in December 2020 MOU has been satisfactorily addressed by government. ASUU is saying that the issue of IPs and UTAs has not been resolved. And you heard the president saying a while ago how the Minister of Education, his approach has not been satisfactory. So really, let's put it in proper perspective. It's not as if anyone is holding brief for ASUU, but would you say that the attitude of the managers of government deployed to handle the ASUU strike has helped in any way to end the strike? Asked differently, why has the strike continued for 7 months now? We're counting by September the 14th.
Yeah, I think that is part of the problem since this strike commenced. The issue of the conduct of government officials. There have been complaints by ASUU members of government officials either talking down on the leaders of ASUU or making inflammatory comments. I think all of these issues about commentary is all about negotiation. That is the language of negotiation. This is a dispute. It's a trade dispute. There's a dispute. And all the stakeholders, you also get members from both sides make comments. It's either way. But these comments are all geared towards trying to arrive at a solution. So I don't think we should be distracted by the body language or the comments made by government officials, no matter how hostile they might be. Let us look at the issue. Let us be focused on the issue so that we don't get distracted about the disposition or the comment made by a particular government official or the other. Let's return to the issues that when you say satisfactorily met, this is a matter of expectation. It's a matter of expectation. ASUU has an expectation, and they are entitled to that. But in life, are all your expectations met all the time? The answer is no. They have expectation. That is legitimate. They should have expectation. We want them to have expectation. But if the expectations are not met, what else can you get in the circumstance so that progress can be made? That is why we that are concerned alumni are appealing that this matter be looked at again. Let there be a reconsideration so that the students that we want to protect can go back. The stay at home is becoming far too long, and the future of the students is being compromised. This is where we're coming from.
Dr. Kwaya, is it about us being distracted by the issues, or those who are supposed to be negotiating really are the ones distracted? I.e., now to be specific, now the government officials. So it's not about you and I making this conversation on the on both ends, you know, of the platform, but about those who are supposed to be negotiating. What should you be telling them right now so that they will not be distracted and they'll get back to the negotiating table and begin to talk?
Well, as we heard from the ASUU president, several meetings have been held. I don't work in the government, but I'm in the media. And when these meetings are held, we get to know that meetings are taking place. The details of the negotiations, since fresh agreements have not been signed, discussions are ongoing, it is difficult to say this is what has been considered in concrete terms, but definitely I know that both sides have made concessions. And it began, as I said earlier, with the non-academic staff and the other unions. Those have reached some reasonable level of agreement and have called off their strike. I believe also that ASUU has also achieved some grounds. It couldn't have been zero. There's no way this strike would not have achieved something. It couldn't be zero. But since the agreements have not been reached, it is difficult for anyone who is not on the negotiating table to pinpoint on the specific things that may have been agreed upon. I don't work in the government. I'm only a concerned alumnus of the Nigerian university system who is coming in to make a case that let there be restoration of activity for our children to resume school. So it is up to the stakeholder. We are encouraging them. We're encouraging both the government, we're encouraging ASUU to narrow their differences.
Some people will
get this right.
We're all members of that concerned alumni. Yeah. I mean, if you were to look at majority of Nigerians who have been through the tertiary education system, we all should be members of your concerned alumni group, and I think you will have an expanded membership. But, you know, there might be different perspectives in terms of how people see this ASUU problem. I mean, especially this with the strike. You have said that when you look at both sides, you think that ASUU has the greatest burden because, according to you, they hold both the yam and the knife. Some people would say they don't see it that way. As you rightly pointed out, we are not privy to the discussions. But so far, so good. Nobody has been able to say, this is what the Minister of Education said with regards to the negotiations that have gone on with ASUU. We rarely see that he grants any interviews based on what they are negotiating with ASUU. The only thing that really comes to mind in recent memory is when he spoke to State House correspondents at the weekly briefing of ministers and other government agencies. We haven't seen that engagement from the part of government, especially the Minister of Education, talking to parents or trying to even say this is where we are with negotiations, or even students, for instance, to address them. Doesn't that bother you?
Well, I cannot hold brief for the Honorable Minister of Education.
I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you as a concerned Nigerian.
I know,
if that doesn't bother you at all.
No, what I can say is that from the public space, what we understood on these negotiations were holding with the Minister of Labour when the strike started. And as the President has informed us, other stakeholders, other eminent Nigerians were also brought on the table. So I think the problem has gone well beyond and out of the bowels of the Ministry of Education alone. All the stakeholders are on the table now. The Minister of Labour has been involved. The President, you heard him on the earlier report, that the Sultan of Sokoto, the President of Khan, and other stakeholders were brought in. That means the negotiation has gone to a level that is even higher. And he said they even made the Chief of Staff. So the negotiations have gone way beyond even the Minister of Education.
So all of these negotiations can be happening, but have you seen any deliberate act on the part of government to keep Nigerians abreast of what the negotiations have been able to achieve? All we have been able to see so far is ASUU still constantly engaging with the public, because a lot of people are asking ASUU, oh, please shelve your strike. Oh, please shelve your strike. And ASUU, every time you invite them, they're willing to engage. They always come and state where they are. But have you seen how active government has been in engaging the public? Would you say that they have been active at all?
No, you see, let us understand the modus operandi of trade union or trade unions or labor movements. ASUU is the aggrieved party in this case. And so they have the honors to always aid their grievances, and they're entitled to that. They need the public to know what their grievances are. They are the ones that need to explain why they're on strike. And that is why you see them occupying more public space in terms of engaging the media, in terms of speaking about progress being made, and so on. But the government on the other side is a party to the dispute, and is the government that the ASUU is approaching with their demands. So the honors have been more on ASUU to explain its action, why it's on strike, what the demands is making, why progress has not been made, what the strike cannot be caught of. This is why as you see ASUU being more visible in the public space.
So perhaps that your explanation makes sense, but you are a former commissioner for information. And you once advised the state on how to manage its own information. Would you say that you're pleased with how the federal government has managed information with regards to its negotiations with ASUU?
Well, this is a matter of public assessment. So,
that's what I'm asking you for your own assessment. Are you satisfied?
No, everyone with his own opinion about. But I'm not here to assess the federal government. I'm not here to assess ASUU. I'm not here to assess anybody. I'm here to make an intervention, to make an appeal. And that is why we are saying that we're not taking ASUU for granted. Nobody is saying that ASUU does not have a point it's making in terms of its charter of demands. No, we are saying that the methodology being adopted, we are saying that the language of the strike that is unending, that is becoming counterproductive, that can we have a rethink? Can we look at other approaches? And your colleague asked me, what are other approaches? And I tried to canvass some of them. We could canvass more if time permits. But this is the direction that we want this matter to be resolved. We cannot remain in dispute forever, and the universities are locked down. We are appealing as an alumni organization that we are concerned. So it's not about coming to assess whether government machinery is working well or not, or whether ASUU is doing. We are saying, look, let there be a narrowing of differences. We are here as conciliators, so it is not to apportion blame. I've said that over and over again. It is because if we do so, we're not standing in between the disputants. Okay. Our role is not to come and add petrol and kerosene to the flames. Our role is to come and make appeal to conscience, appeal to morality, appeal to goodness, appeal to a sense of reasoning of the plight of the students that have been outside. Can't we just have a think for our students? You have already said the students of the children of ASUU members on our campuses, and they are also at home. It is true. So we are all involved. So for the sake of the future, the future of our children, this is the point that we're making.
Well, fair enough. It's a fair enough point. I'm sure that, members of ASUU, individual members, might be watching you this morning, and maybe it might also spur another conversation, who knows. But when I asked you to do an assessment, I mean, oftentimes, even when parents want to scold children, they will, or even reconcile them, they will give you your own, where you've gone wrong, and give you a point where you can both reconcile, But we have to thank you so much.
Yeah, but the point before we round up, discipline and adjudication of disputes at family level is a different thing. We're talking of
if you say so, Dr. Akwaya,
macro environment that the whole Nigerian society
you say so,
is involved.
But we have to go now. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts this morning. He is a former commissioner for information in Benue State and also publisher, editor-in-chief of Daily Asset newspaper. But he's appearing here this morning as a member of the concerned alumni of Nigerian universities, appealing to ASUU to call off its now almost 7-month-old strike. Thank you once again for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.